started.
Josh is the owner of Signal Brandworks, and he's a certified story brand consultant as well. He does lots of content, and content's one of the most important thing in websites. So, tell us a little bit about your what is the story brand method, Josh? That's something that that you do quite a bit of, right?
Yeah, it's a big part of what I do. So Story Brand is it's a company that's kind of built out this a marketing framework. So it's built around this problem that a lot of people have, where it's like, you go to a cocktail party and people are like, "Hey, what do you do?" And people just a lot of times they just answer, "Well, it's complicated." They go down, they start talking about this, start talking about that, start talking about that. By the time they've actually gotten to the end of what they're wanting to say, then somebody's lost interest and moved on altogether. So there's a really a big problem in business right now, and it's just that people don't understand how to communicate the value of what they do in words that people will actually listen to, resonate with, and care about. So that you can see that on people's websites. You can see that in how they talk about themselves on billboards, or how they talk about themselves in their email marketing, all over social media. It's just, I walk throughout, I look at, marketing all over the place, and I'm just like, it's a lot of it's just cringeworthy, So a couple of things that are really important to know about the story brand framework is that, one, most of the time people are constantly daydreaming, except when they're listening to a story. So the idea is that stories are super powerful. So we need to include stories in our marketing and in our messaging. So one application of that would be on your website, for instance. So how can you use story? How can you use the concept of a story to draw people into what you're doing? So the other aspect of it is that there's just like a lot of confusion. A lot of times people are confused by all the different kinds of messages in the marketplace, but then two, the fact that you are potentially saying a lot of different kinds of things in your marketing. So the idea is like, let's use story to find the core message of what you're doing as a business, and then say it and communicate it really simply and really clearly. So there's not, a lot of times people will think like the most impressive company wins, right? But it's not the most impressive company that wins. It's not, it's the company that can communicate about what they do the clearest, so people understand what you do and will buy. So it's a 7-part framework that basically taps into the common threads behind any good story, whether it's like Jason Bourne trying to find out who he is and beat the bad guys, or Luke Skywalker trying to become a Jedi and take down the Death Star. The same things that make those stories really awesome can actually be used in your marketing as well.
Okay, so are we talking about like kind of the typical sort of hero's journey where we're trying to infuse these archetypal stories into content? Or is there kind of multiple variations that are out there? What are some of the more powerful kind of frameworks that you use to tell these stories?
So the core of the story brand concept is this thing called a brand script. So the idea is, let's get really clear on not just your story, but the story that your customers are trying to live out. So one of the big problems that one of the big mistakes that a lot of businesses make is they make themselves the hero of the story, right? But you are not the hero of the story. When someone comes to your website, the temptation as a business owner is to just think, hey, I need to be the hero of the story, right? But no, they're the hero of the story. You're the guide. Like, you're the Yoda to their Luke Skywalker, and you're here to help them be successful. So really how the framework works is by putting there's 7 components to it. And I could just walk through them if you want me to.
Sure.
And just kind
That'd
of see. So you mentioned the hero's journey, and I think it's Joseph Campbell is kind of the father of that concept. So that's an existing framework for using story, but story brand is really kind of taking some of those elements and then putting them in a context that's really easy for business owners to use and apply in their marketing. So the first step is there's a character, and the character wants something. And like I said just a minute ago, business owners tend to put themselves as like the hero or the character of the story, but it's really not. It's all about your customers or your ideal customers and what are they trying to live out. So it starts with a character. They want something, and the tension comes in, or like the real story develops when we get really clear about the problem that person is facing. So there's some problem that's going on in their life that's keeping them from getting what they want. So after we're really clear about the problem, there's a guide that comes into the picture. So the guide can empathize with that person, and they demonstrate authority. There's those two elements kind of come into play. So instead of just talking about yourself all the time on your website, you're really talking about what your character wants and bringing up the problem that they're experiencing, how that makes them feel. And then you can position yourself a little bit by just creating empathy and demonstrating your own authority, your ability to speak into that situation. So after you've done that a little bit, the next step is to the guide gives the character a plan to actually overcome this problem. So usually it's 3 simple steps. And as a business owner, it could be like, how do we, it should be basically your process for solving that person's problem in 3 easy, simple steps, right? So just making it really simple. After that, the guide calls the hero to action. So there's a call to action element that's pretty simple and straightforward. And if they do all that stuff, they do what you told them to do, that will result in either success, and we get really clear about what success looks like, or if they don't do it, failure. So we get really clear about what potential failures are for that person. So when you combine it, it's a character that wants something, they meet a guide who gives them a plan, calls them to action, and that action results in either success or failure. So applying that to your marketing is like, I just see it all the time. When you come up with the words that help tell your customer's story in the right way, it's a really, really powerful thing.
It makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Mm-hmm. It really does. Because the customer, they are the center of the story. Mm-hmm. So to focus that center, that story on somebody else, that doesn't have nearly the same kind of resonance that you're going to have. You're more customer centered with that. That being said, you said that this is something that goes on, that you see on billboards, social media, kind of the pillar content of websites. In order to accurately get this story across, is it something that can be done in very short form as well as long form? Because it sounds like, kind of a semi-intricate storyline. Is there a way to break it down into something that could fit, real quickly on a billboard that you're going to get with the limited amount of time that you have as you're passing that by?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So, yeah, absolutely. So the concept of the brand script or story brand is not necessarily to say that you have to say all these things at the same time. It's just that when you do any marketing, you're only going to say things that pull from these 7 buckets, right? So consider them kind of buckets or deposits, and or banks that you can pull from. And so once you're really clear on what my character actually wants and what success are they trying to live out, on my billboard, I can pull out that success and say something like, want to actually go on vacation for the first time in 9 months, work with trouble-free employees, something along those lines. So it's like getting really clear and specific about what they want is a great success is usually where most people find success in applying the story brand framework. But the other thing that's really cool is like being able to pull from the problem and pull from success and kind of pitting those two together. So for instance, a lot of people have terrible posture, and they end up going to chiropractors, and the chiropractors are fixing problems over and over and over. And so we created an ergonomic chair that helps you overcome those things. So buy one now, so you can So you start with the problem and you get someone interested, and it kind of brings them in. It creates a story. It opens a story loop is kind of the concept that we call it. So you always want to find the answer to that problem, right? So, but yeah, to answer your question in short, you can just pull from any one of those buckets in almost any scenario and still be kind of within the story brand framework, so to speak,
Okay. And then in terms of if we're pulling small amounts from different buckets, and then we have messaging that in today's day and age, I mean, we have so much stuff that goes out on social media, and there's kind of a limited amount of capacity that people have. Most people aren't on there 24/7. So the sequencing of that could easily kind of there could be problems where if you had kind of one social media post or something that was pulling out of each bucket in succession, is there going to be a problem if we kind of switch the order of those? Because naturally the customer might miss out on one and kind of skip to the next. How does that play out? Is the sequencing very important, or are people normally able to pick up just kind of getting one piece at a time, bucket by bucket?
That's a good question. Order. I mean, that's a good question, and you're probably, I don't know that I would recommend breaking it out quite so much. I would probably just think, hey, as I'm writing any individual article, I'm going to want to touch on what they want, what the problem is, how to overcome it, and then what success looks like, or what the problem is and the consequences if they don't, the pulling from the failure bucket. So I don't know that, I mean, you could try different things like that and just see what people respond to. The cool thing about it is there are some kind of hard and fast rules, like don't make yourself the hero of the story, don't overcomplicate things, like using insider language that people don't understand. That's a big no-no, according to the story brand framework. It's like, but when it comes to actually implementing it, that's where it gets a little more nuanced. So for instance, like the 7 components of the framework, we kind of consider those like chords. Like you're learning 7 chords, and Taylor Swift, she knows 7 chords, but she makes billions of dollars, right? It's about her ability to take those chords and make an awesome song with it. And so you may find an application of those 7 chords that some people had never thought about, and so I wouldn't necessarily say, hey, don't do that, but I just haven't necessarily tested it out that way. So
okay,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, a song with 1 chord isn't really much of a song. You're kind of strumming a beat. So
exactly.
It sounds like if you obviously want to incorporate all 7 if possible, but if you end up having maybe 3 of those chords to make up one, then that actually kind of has more of a story dynamic instead of having to incorporate all 7 necessarily, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So an example of that would be this concept of like a one-liner or an elevator pitch for your business. Like, how do you actually do that? And so there's a framework or process we kind of walk through, which is one, you start with the problem. So let's just say we're at this cocktail party, right? And someone's like, hey, you tell me what you do. You could easily say, I have an agency. I help people solve problems. It's like, well, what do you mean by that? Or I have a VA agency, and they're like, huh? I don't necessarily understand. And that's okay, but because you'd probably get into it more after that. But what you could do is start with the problem and say, a lot of business owners are wasting their time doing things they shouldn't be doing. It's adding no value to their business, and it's just they find themselves constantly frustrated with mundane tasks. So that's like the problem, right? So you start with that, and you get them interested because they're like, yeah, I'm a business owner. Yeah, I waste my time on mundane, boring tasks sometimes that I don't need to be doing. And so the next element would be you'd pull from the plan section. So you'd say, here's our process for solving that problem. So we have a team of people that handle all the boring problems, and that might be all the mundane tasks that you don't want to do. Boom. That's the plan. That's the solution, right? And then the third element would be like success or the positive outcome. So you say a lot of business, so you might say, so they can focus on what actually generates revenue for their business. So you could put them all together and say something like, a lot of business owners are wasting time on tasks that don't add value to their business. So we have a plan that we have a process that helps them get rid of all that boring stuff so they can focus on the stuff that matters. Boom, you know? So it's those kind of, you can see how like pulling those three elements together can be really helpful. But
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've stumbled across different pitches, I think completely by accident, that the one, like I'm thinking of one right now that where we do a lot of white label work for people in addition to helping out businesses directly. But in the last couple of weeks, I've been talking with lots of smaller VA agencies, or not even agencies, basically people that typically like work at home moms and stuff like that, that are, you know, doing virtual assistants, but on a very small scale. And I'll talk to them on the phone and be like, so it sounds like the problem that we have is no matter what, the work at home kind of turns into slave at home. You're still only making $20 an hour. And if you're working 8 hours a day, then that's $160 a day, and you're working for every single penny of that. So something that I figured out to be able to help you is a simple 3-step plan where you're able to ramp up the amount of work that you're able to get, the amount that your brand is able to do, and your earning power. And that's, I guess, kind of like the Yoda pitch into there that I never really knew that I was doing. And then I say the 3 steps are finding an account, correctly onboarding the account, and then delegating that account to somebody else. Then you can really simply, the amount of money that they're charging, say $20 an hour, they're able to charge that directly to the client, and then the work that they pay for us to do that they delegate is $10 an hour, so they can keep that $10 an hour, and then they can keep going through that 3-step process again, and every single person they get, they increase their earning power by $10 an hour. I've had the incredible response from people when I break it down on really simple terms like that, where I know that in the past I've just confused people in a massive amount where they're like, what do you do? And kind of a little bit of everything, anything that can be done on a phone or a computer. They're like, I still don't get it. So it definitely resonates what you're saying. And I think that not having that clarity and not having that framework that's set up for people in a relatable way is definitely a huge problem, because I see that on lots of different things too, now that I'm understanding what your process is, because it is a simple way of doing things, and there's a lot of logic behind what you're saying.
Yep. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, it's cool to hear that you've kind of applied it to the sales process, and you hadn't necessarily even thought about doing that. But like, I think giving people like 3 simple steps, you know, even if that's not necessarily totally explanatory, you know, explaining what you do in detail, it's like, it makes it seem easy. And so like one of the things that kind of drives the story brand concept is that we as people are trying to do things. We're trying to survive and thrive, and we're trying to conserve calories. So like, if we come to a website and I don't see what's in it for me, like what's going to help me thrive, I'm out of there. You know, if I come to a website and it takes too many calories, like too much work to actually get it and understand, I'm out of there. You know, so the idea is just, you know, simple is better, and noise is like confusion and noise, and they're your worst enemy. So
makes a lot of sense. So
yeah.
Touching on that, what do you think is I hear a big controversy between long and short form. Different people say different things. Sometimes, you know, you need to capture more attention, you need to go for the longer form, and I'll see posts on Facebook that are just ridiculously long, which sometimes, you know, I've read the whole thing, and sometimes I get 2 paragraphs into it and I'm done, you know. And then I see some things that are really short, and maybe they could kind of take people, they could be a little bit longer because they're captivating enough to capture people's attention. Is there
Mm-hmm.
kind of a sweet spot, or how do you weigh in on that between the long and short form? What do you think is more effective?
Yeah. So a couple of things, like the overarching thought here is I kind of think that the content needs to be as long as it needs to be and no longer, right? So, and that's kind of like a, you might think, come on, that's not really an answer, um, but but it gets you thinking of the mindset, like how long does this actually need to be? And someone just posted in a Facebook group, like, how long should my video be? And I was like, well, my answer to that question is always test and see what works for you. But that is the right answer, because your audience may just not, you may not respond to really long form things, and that's fine. And someone else's audience may. So that's like the overarching answer. But beneath that, I tend to think that things that cost more money and things that involve more trust need to have some element of like longer form content attached to it in some way, whether it's a longer form sales letter, whether it's a longer form video. Like if you've got to overcome some really big trust hurdle or some really big cost hurdle, there's going to be a little more work that has to do to warm that person up. So long form content may take the form of like a 10 or 20 minute video, maybe a 45 to an hour and a half long webinar. It might also just be 5 1-minute videos over the course of 10 days, where you're retargeting people that watch that video. So so typically when it's crazy how long, like, people read 10-page sales letters. It's insane. Like I write that kind of stuff. Like I'm certified in another process where it's like I write direct response copy as well. So like if you really need to sell something, direct response copy is typically what most people think of when it's like time to write words that actually sell. And those pages are like super long, and you would think, man, my God, why is this page so stinking long? Well, 2 reasons. One, people can scan for the information they want. If you write it well, they can scan and find the answers. And then if they're ready to buy, they can just go down there and click the big red button and go. But for the people that need a little bit more work, a little bit more time, if you write it long enough, you're able to answer all those questions and persuade them. But if you write it too short, then you miss out on that opportunity. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but gets a little bit.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. Just for our listeners that aren't really familiar with the kind of the lingo that we got, can you define what direct response writing is?
Yeah, so direct response goes back to the idea back in the day when there was no internet, right? People would put mail, you'd get a lot more mail, which is called direct mail, in your inbox. That was like the marketing of the day, right? So you had magazines that would come, catalogs, you'd had little sales letters for, get your family crest on a plaque, that kind of thing. And so the idea was, let's put it in the mail, write it in such a way that we can get a direct response from that person. So instead of just, branding, which is like you might see a billboard for Nike or a TV commercial for Nike or something, and they're just saying, just do it. That's not calling you to a direct response. But if you want someone to see what your message is and actually do something immediately, that's the concept of direct response copywriting. So copywriting is just another way of saying writing in the marketing world. So direct response copywriting is writing to help sell stuff.
Okay. On an immediate basis, where they can basically go from, who is this person? I've never heard of this brand, to this sounds great, I'm going to buy it right now. So kind of one all-encompassing thing that's trying to get them to buy right now.
Yep.
Okay.
And it might be, it may not be buy, it might be sign up for your webinar, download, listen to your podcast,
Push them to the next step in the process. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's definitely, I think, anyone who's out there listening is going to get a good idea of what we're talking about. In terms of what you think works. This is kind of an opinion question.
Mhm.
There's so many different mediums out there that people are using, the written word, pictures, memes, videos, all that sort of stuff. Um, Capturing people's attention can be pretty hard because there's a lot of noise that's out there. Do you think that it's important to kind of combine multiple mediums together, or do you think that it's best to just kind of find one and stick with that? Like if you have a really good video sales letter, do you need to have a really long direct response copy with that? Within that, do you
Mhm.
need to have any pictures in that? Or is it better to just focus on one and kind of keep the attention on that? What are
Mm.
your insights on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess there's two answers. One, you mentioned like the video sales letter plus the copy, like those are maybe images in there. I would say um, my first answer is just get it out there, get something out there. A lot of times there are people that, the problem is, just perfectionism is like the father of procrastination, right? So like if you feel like it has to be perfect and you need a video sales letter and you need perfect direct response copy and you need images and it's going to keep you from actually getting out there and getting your message out, then I'd say, hey, forget all that other stuff and just write the copy, just the words on the page, and put that out. But I really like, I think that all those things are tools in your toolkit. And so who's going to build the best house, the guy with one hammer or the guy with a saw, a hammer, a ruler, measuring tape, whatever they use, levels, all that kind of stuff. So the more tools you have, the idea is that the more powerful your persuasion can be. So I'm a big fan of the idea that in terms of like when you're trying to determine what your like how should I generate leads in my business, you could try 400 different things, and if you tried 400 different things, pretty sure none of them are going to work for you, right? So because the amount that you're investing in each one is not going to be enough to really move the needle on any particular one, right? So my idea or my thought about it is pick 3 that you could test and test them systematically. Don't put a ton of time, don't put a ton of energy, give enough that you can actually test those out. And then once you find the one that actually works, like Facebook versus Google ads versus YouTube ads, for instance, double down on Facebook ads if that's the one that seems to be moving the needle for you, and then invest in that. And as much as you can, bring in video, bring in more tools, and once you've determined what that good channel for you to invest in is. So if Facebook's the thing, start out with just a simple ad, and then improve that over time by potentially adding video, potentially adding more images on your lane pages or things like that. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. Kind of touching on the same question in a different way, I guess. Some people are more visual learners, some people are more audio learners, some people kind of need that hard logic to be able to kind of push any sort of decision that they're going to make. Is it important do you think that that it's good to integrate all the different things? Could you have part of the story be in the video and then the rest of the story be in the text? Or do you think that some people are going to kind of skip past the video, go to the text, so everything should be encapsulated in the text? Some people are just going to watch the video and not read, so everything should be encapsulated in the video. Some people are just going to scan and look at the pretty pictures, and that should kind of be able to
Yeah.
tell the same thing. Or do you think that it integrates for a lot of the users, or they just kind of pick out the one that jumps out more to them? So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I will say that video tends to be like there's a reason that YouTube and Facebook and everybody out there is doubling down on video. It's that it can accelerate that trust timeline. Like if you need a certain amount of trust before someone works with you, which everybody does, video can really help accelerate that timeline really quickly. Because if you don't come across like a scumbag, I guess, but so uh, video is a great tool for getting warming up an audience really quickly, which is why you might see videos where you can't speed up or you can't push pause. It's like one page, just a video, and you have to watch that to the end, or there's no other option. So I would say if you're going to put a really important message in the video, make it mandatory that that person watches that video before they progress to the next information. So like, for instance, you could just put that on one page, have them watch all that all the way through, and then when they're done, they can push through to the next page and get more information. But if you're just kind of wanting to make sure you've got all your bases covered in terms of the persuasive elements that you need to have on your landing page, I'd probably put a video up there that would help conversions, but not necessarily be mandatory. And then reiterate you can put the information that really also just needs to be on the page, so that whether they watch the video or not, they're still getting what they need,
Okay. So set it up to where they can kind of pick whatever medium works best for them and still get the whole story as much as possible. That makes a lot of sense. In terms of something that we get that's the ultimate kind of short form that I see people going around on a lot of different levels with is, I know that you do some email marketing and writing direct response for that. What do you feel about subject lines? Do you have any insights that you could throw us on that? Because that seems like some people go all over the board.
Yeah. So there's this, it's another one of those things where it's like, there's no right answer. I mean, you're just going to have to test that thing. And so one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to send an email with only one subject line. Like if you're not testing two subject lines to see which one gets a better open rate at the same time, if you send out an email, the idea is it's called an A/B test. So you're testing A versus B, and whichever one performs better, you do more of that. So I think a tool like MailChimp they have a tool where basically you can test two subject lines at the same time, and they'll send both to 20% of your audience, and whichever one performs better, they'll send that to the remaining 80. And so anyway, that's the first thing I would recommend, is always test it. The second thing I'd recommend is think about your email like the headline of an article in a magazine. The only purpose of that subject line, the only purpose of that headline in that magazine is to get someone to read the next thing. So the whole goal is to get them to open the email, right? And then the whole goal of the first sentence of the email is to get them to read the next sentence, and to get them to read the next sentence. So as you're going through, be thinking about one tool you can kind of keep in your back pocket is this idea of opening story loops. So a story loop, I've mentioned it earlier, but it's like, hey, at the beginning, or one example might be, in a minute, I'm going to tell you a story about my buddy Doug, who drove to the Grand Canyon, and he saw something, I mean, you would never believe. But I'll get to that in a minute, right? So that's like an open story loop, and you're like, oh, I want to listen to what happens to Doug. I don't even care who Doug is. But so you can do that same thing in your marketing, where it's like opening up. The idea would be the five secrets to diabetic weight loss. There's an open story, like interested in tips for losing weight as a diabetic. You'll never believe this. That kind of idea is like, okay, well, I've got to figure out what's the end of that story, or what the answer to that thing is. So those are terrible examples, but you get the idea, where in your subject lines, try to be thinking about what can I pique curiosity with, and how can I get them, what can I do that could potentially get them to want to open an email and learn a little bit more, with the idea being that, you got to test. Another good way to think about emails is the idea of creating bullet points. So if you think about the content that you want to share in your email, and if you could write down a bullet point or several bullet points that potentially could summarize that content and kind of make it interesting. If you create a list of like 5 to 10 of those, then that's going to give you some potential great ideas for email subject lines too. What's crazy too, though, is that like you might just type nothing in the subject line, like no subject, and people might open that, or hey. Apparently, the most open subject line for all emails is hey. And people use that in their marketing too. It makes it feel more personal, right? So that would be one other tip, would be, as much as you can, try to make it feel personal, and as much as you can, try to make it not feel like they're being marketed to via email.
Yeah, I've clicked on those ones. I can definitely because I think something that happens is I can see the spam in my in the inbox, and I feel like I can smell that a mile away. But then in between there, I'm looking for the things that are important, that are messages from friends, clients, different things like that are normally quite a bit more casual than what comes over in the traditional sort of marketing thing. So when I see something like, hey, I'm like, oh, that's probably one of my clients sending me something. Like that guy is typing it on his iPhone. He doesn't really, have that whole kind of branding thing going on. So I'm like, okay, just to make sure, like, is that a real one? Oh, okay, it's not. That's someone trying to market you as direct mail or something, but it definitely gets me to open it.
Yeah, you run a risk when you write an email that is obviously clickbait. Like that's just the whole idea there is just, but behind using a hey as the email subject is just to get someone to open that email. Like, and if you do something that's not personal after they open that email, or feels I don't know, if it just feels spammy, you're kind of taking I consider it like, we've all got this trust built up with people. It's like a bank account. And like, if you start pulling, that's one way that you could potentially pull out of that trust bucket. So if they feel tricked, or you use tactics that make them feel scummy, or like they're being taken advantage of or marketed to, then you're just pulling out of that trust bank. And the lower that goes, the less likely they're going to continue to work with you or continue to open your emails. And so it's always, you got to be thinking about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Because once you get kind of written off as somebody that's pulling these kind of sneaky tactics, then they're going to be on the fence for it, or they're going to be on the watch for that from you, and kind of write you off as that. And then also it could probably hurt the other people's chances of trying to get on that too, once that tactic kind of gets exploited and turns into, I think this is a trick, when you see that sort of thing. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. The concept of putting in and taking stuff out of the trust bucket is also a very interesting concept. What do you think are some good ways that you can kind of quickly put things in to the trust bucket to get a good relationship going initially? What are some tips that you have on that?
That's a great question, man. And I think most of the time people just asking that question is the best thing you could possibly do at the start of any marketing campaign. Like how can I get more leads? Like, how can I build more trust? Like, be thinking about that. So there's two ways you can build trust. One is by empathizing with people. So if you can share a story or relate to people in a unique, in an authentic and personal way, that connects people to you, and you can build out from that relationship from there. So if you have a story that's like, if you're the founding of Trouble Free Employees, like if you really experienced the value of or the pain of not having the VA, right? Like you could tell that not having, or being totally overwhelmed with work that just wasn't adding value to your business. Like that's a great way to build empathy, because most people can probably relate to that to some degree, and it gives insight into your story. And then the other way is to give stuff away. So when we think about things like creating a lead magnet or creating, something that you offer someone in exchange for an email, like a PDF or, a video series or something like that. Most people, when they start that process, they think about, how can I convince someone that I'm really good to work with? And so those lead magnets or those resources end up being things like 10 ways to know I'm the best provider ever, or 10 ways to pick the best this, and like, oh, it just so happens that that's exactly what we do. And that's okay. But a better thing to do would be to create content that helps someone get a quick win. It's like, ask yourself, how can I get a quick win right now, today? Like, how can I give value? How can I, what problems can I solve for that person? And so if you think, here's kind of my formula for creating a great lead magnet is like, what's the number one problem my customers are facing? How can I solve that for them in 3 to 5 pages? So, and the idea would be, give that to them. You could do that in a blog content. You could do that in podcasts, wherever you want to, whatever, an email. Or you could just make it the lead magnet itself, that resource that you give out. And yeah, you might require an email to do that, but that's all right, because if you actually solve a problem and it's not some veiled attempt to just sell something, then that is a deposit in that trust bucket. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. To provide value right away, something that's gonna help them. It definitely makes sense. It's kind of more of a transactional sort of thing, where they see that as they're getting value for free right away with a very, very small investment of just providing their email or whatever it is that you're asking for them to get to the next step. That definitely makes a lot of sense. I don't want to keep you on for too long, because I know that your time is extremely valuable, but I want to touch on a couple other things before we finish up today.
Sure.
How you mentioned that you do some coaching, you do some live event sort of things, and then you do a lot of the actual the work for this, where you can actually make content for people and help them create these stories and these direct messaging, direct sales letters, killer content, blog content, all that sort of stuff, right? So how can people get in touch with you to have you do that kind of work, kind of the done for you sort of solutions? And then how can they find where they could do the live coaching? Where's the information for that?
Yeah. So one way you can just reach out to me, Josh at signalbrandworks.com is my email. So if you ever have any questions about this, or you're just curious about the story brand process, or sort of, copywriting, or, lead generation, anything related to the message that you need to communicate in order to get people to listen to you, like you, know you, and then work with you. So Josh at Signal, Signal brandworks.com. And so a couple of the ways that my business and my team help people, a lot of times it starts with that messaging, like, what is your company's messaging? That's the core of any marketing that you're going to do from here on out. So we really dial in on that. And then we look at, most of the time people are asking us to help them with the copywriting or the foundational things in their marketing. So for instance, writing the copy for their website, writing the words that actually go on their website, building that website. So that's something we do as well. We have a really high-end team of web developers and designers, and they create awesome, simple, conversion-oriented websites that tell your customer story and position you as the person that can actually help them get the positive outcome that they're looking for in life, right? And so that's one element. But then also we help people on the coaching side. What I'll do is I've got a program where sometimes people want to pay me to come in and actually do all those things that I talked about, whether it's like developing your messaging, developing your website, writing the copy, creating a lead magnet, creating an email funnel on the back end of that, and then driving traffic to that to the right audience, into that to generate leads. Sometimes that's really the core of my process. But then sometimes people are like, hey, Josh, I don't have the money to necessarily pay you to do all of that, but I want to do it myself. And so we're actually just launching a coaching program right now. And for the next couple of months, it's going to be super discounted. So if anybody hears this and they're like, well, I want that in my business, but I'm kind of tight on budget right now, but this might be a good time to jump in on something like that. But the idea is that you can get all those same deliverables without, the decade of experience learning all of these things. So you're going to leverage me and my team's experience to come in and teach you and educate you and look over your shoulder as you're building out your lead magnet, as you're redoing your website, and as you're building your ad campaigns and stuff like that, so that that not only is it being done in the best way possible, but you've got someone that's actually coming in and making suggestions and tweaking things along the way for you. So you can have confidence that when you are ready to start really marketing yourself and your business, that things are set up the best way possible. So that's a coaching program that I have. But we also, sometimes people will just say, we need help generating leads. And so we are also, so we've got a team dedicated to Facebook ads. And so that's really a big part as well, as the Facebook ad side. So anyway, several different ways you could get involved if you're looking for help on that stuff.
Thank you so much for you've just been dropping value bomb after value bomb during this transmission. And there's just a ton of great takeaways that have come from this conversation, I believe. And if anyone is interested in getting in touch with Josh, you have his contact information. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see links below. If you're watching it on any of our audio forms in the description, you will see Josh's contact information to get in touch with him. And then if you're watching it on our website, there's actually a contact form right underneath this video where you can contact Josh directly. So really, really cool stuff. The kind of knowing that you have a one-stop content shop where basically people can come and you can do the done-for-you solutions, or you can do the coaching, which sounds like there's a tremendous amount of long-term value that comes with that. Because if you have an underperforming content team and you come and you're able to give them a couple pieces of good content, that's one thing. But it's kind of like the story of give a man a fish and he'll be hungry tomorrow, and teach a man to fish and he'll be able to feed himself for the rest of his life. So there's definitely that package makes a lot of sense to be able to help people that have kind of underperforming content teams get things going, not only for today but also for tomorrow. That makes a huge amount of sense. And then just the knowledge and mastery that you have that has been displayed in the information that you've shared with us in this podcast is very, very helpful. So thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you, and looking forward to hopefully having you on again at some point in the future to discuss how things are going, and hopefully be able to give some more value bombs for people on what they can do to really improve their content marketing and kind of get out of the cringe-worthy place, where I definitely understand where a lot of people are kind of on that program, breaking it down into a simple context and framework that everyone can apply, everyone can understand, comes across much better, and sets people up to really generate good relationships with that customer. All this stuff makes a huge amount of sense. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And thanks for having me on, but also thank you for hooking me up all the time. I've got a VA with Trouble Free Employees, and she's been phenomenal. I was telling my wife the other day about how much I haven't been thinking about certain things that have just been driving me crazy for the past 6 months, like email and calendar. I send a voice message to my VA. Hey, schedule an appointment here. It takes me 30 seconds to maybe schedule an appointment, but I just hate doing it. And so anyway, I just am really grateful for your team too. So thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you. and we'll be getting you back on here at some point soon. So
Awesome, man.
thanks, Josh.
Thanks, buddy. Bye.